It's from the Minister for DPME in the presidency. And then they are attending to KZN crisis. That's the apology that I have. Seemingly everybody is here. I can just confirm Honorable Weber is here. Good morning. Honorable Bryant, you are here.
Good morning, Chair.
Yes, Chairperson. Hello.
And then Honorable Phillips, you are here. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair.
Then Honorable Paulsen, you are here. Good morning. Honorable Paulsen, you were the first one to say Kuyamore. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm trying to check what else. Honorable Mbisi, are you here? Yeah. Good morning, Minister. Good morning, Honorable Mkunu.
Good morning, Honorable Chair, and good morning to all honorable members, to Deputy Minister and also to the DG and her team.
Good morning, Deputy Minister Sochi. And good morning to everyone. Then the agenda is before us as put on the screen. It's going to be a long day. Then before we proceed, you recall we had a request from the minister on the other item on the agenda. Can you scroll it down a bit, Nkata? Yeah, that's item number 4. I asked Chileka to share the letter with you. Then, yeah, that's it. So we have the request from the minister. I think it will be fair for all of us to then allow her to consider the report as she requested. And then we can get a date in May as she has proposed. Over to you, colleagues. Honorable Phillips.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to everybody. I would just like to express my disappointment at the fact that we are not going to get this presentation today, but not only for me, but for every single person in St. Lucia who has been waiting for months and months and actually years. Something to be done about the flooding and then for the report to come out. And many of them have contacted me and they are really—
Recording in progress.
That this is not going to come out today. And they would like me to convey their extreme frustration and disappointment to the department and to the minister. So I'm just doing that on behalf of the farmers and the small-scale farmers and the other people in St. Lucia. So thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you. So we'll note the concern and then we'll definitely schedule the Honorable Minister. You want to say something?
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and let me humbly apologize to Member Phillips. It is not our intention to delay the committee for any considerable length of time. And I fully concur with herself and yourself and other members that this matter is an urgent matter. I think it's important just to share with colleagues today that the estuary mouth breached naturally on Thursday morning and has remained open throughout the weekend. And obviously, it's as a result of the very rough seas and the huge volumes of rain that occurred in KwaZulu-Natal over the past week. But I'm sure that when we do get to Isimangaliso, the CEO will be able to update members on the current situation. But as of last night, the estuary mouth was still open. Thank you very much.
So we'll try to get a slot as soon as possible in May so that this matter get attended to. Then another hand, or it's a historical hand, Honorable Phillips.
Sorry, ma'am, yeah, it's a historical hand. Thank you.
Okay. Having said that, can I then get the mover and the seconder for the adoption of the agenda with the removal of that item that we're referring to on the first bullet on 4? Can I get a mover? Honorable Mkono is moving for the adoption, a seconder for the adoption of the agenda.
So, sorry, Chairperson, I don't want to interrupt you. Just quickly, I know we're removing that bullet point. Are we moving it to a different meeting date as well?
Yes, I think we must get a date. It's just that it's off now. You can also look at the. We can also look at the program. We can talk about it later to get a date when I will. Yes, that's the issue.
Thanks.
Also, the officials will also assist us to get a date as soon as possible. In the spirit of the letter of the minister. Then we have so yes. Who's seconding? After that, are you seconding the agenda, Honorable Brent, so that we proceed as it is?
Yes, I will do. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. We have a huge delegation here. From the department side, we have the DG leading the team. Then SANParks, their board members who are here. I don't see the chairperson's name on the list. Maybe when we deal with that, somebody will tell us who's leading the delegation. And then we have the SANBI board chairperson, welcome, Prof. And the CEO, acting CEO of SANParks, I see you are here as well with the entire management team. Then we do have the board chairperson of Isimangaliso, Professor Nzama, together with the CEO and the other management team members that are here. Also the...
Good morning, Honorable Chairperson.
Yes, you're welcome. And then from the South African Weather Services as well, I've seen the CEO is here, together with the chairperson. And good morning, colleagues.
Honorable Chair.
Yeah.
Honorable Chair, the chairperson of the Weather Service has just had to attend to a work commitment, but she will be with us when we consider the Weather Service.
Okay. If that is the case, then it would be okay. It will be okay then.
I will also follow up with the chair of SANParks. I know that she's been very ill, but she did indicate to me yesterday she would try to be with us today. I will follow up with her.
Okay. Then it's fine then. I should think then, under the circumstances, then you will all agree, looking from today's agenda, that We are beginning the second term with the presentations from the department and all the entities approved 2022-2023 annual performance plans and key program priorities. And then the other presentation will be the briefing by the minister relating to the Wildlife Welfare Forum. It is then important that we need to, then the issue of the DPME as well, given the apology, I don't know how we're going to deal with that, but we'll see as the presentations have been sent, then just that then they had to apologize, but we always appreciate their willingness to always share their perspective with us to enable us to do our oversight work better. And then we then appreciate and value the contribution that yourselves, Minister and team, that you are making here. Then the issue that we also want to raise with you, Minister, we believe that you are also satisfied that a good planning went into the APPs, which are being presented here before us. And then we hope we will not encounter what has been going on for some time now that of having significant numbers of annual performance targets not being met, whereas the relevant budget allocations for those specific activities are depleted. We've seen that in the past, and then this, honestly, they reflect poor planning on the part of the program heads and their cohort of senior staff. We would like then to remind the departmental officials that a program performance below 80% can no longer be tolerated. And you're on record saying that, Minister, and we're not even going to be asking about what had happened in case of suboptimal program performance, but rather we're going to ask you, Minister, what have you done to those individuals who are performing below the acceptable level of 80%. We are raising this, Minister, because we are of the view that unless we make drastic changes, we risk institutionalizing bad performance, thereby tarnishing the name of the entire department. We therefore suggest that program performance should constitute a significant part of the key performance areas of the staff members. Having said that, I want to welcome you, Minister, together with the board members of our various entities, including the officials from the department and the entities. Then I will hand over to you so that you start to brief us on item number 2. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and allow me to greet yourself and the Deputy Minister and all honourable members, as well as all CEOs of entities, board chairpersons, and all officials led by the Director General who are in this meeting this morning. Chairperson, I think that it's appropriate that we begin today by acknowledging the very tragic events that unfolded in KwaZulu-Natal over the past week, and I think in particular expressing our very sincere condolences to everybody who lost family members. I think it's appropriate, Chairperson, to start there because one of our major priorities as a department is to lead the battle against climate change and to work together with all levels of government to support a process of building climate resilience in our society. And I think last night when His Excellency President Ramaphosa spoke, he did refer to the climate crisis and its impact on this tragedy and on the importance of building climate resilience. So this obviously is a matter that will have to receive increased attention during the course of this year. And we know, Chairperson, that under your leadership, the committee is very committed to assisting us to ensure that the climate bill is passed by the National Assembly this year. And I think that that we have spoken about the fact that we have done a lot of work voluntarily over the past many years. But there's no doubt that we do require the legislative environment that will allow us to focus effectively on dealing with the climate crisis, and that legislative instrument is the climate bill. The second priority for this year has to be the mainstreaming of the work of the high-level panel and the significant recommendations in that panel that pertain to the transformation of the wildlife sector. And I think, Chairperson, you spoke in your introduction about the importance of effective planning in the organization. And I think that the focus of our own departmental processes have been looking at how do we mainstream the issues contained in this APP in the performance plans of officials and in the performance plans of branches. And we absolutely agree with you that it is intolerable that we are allocated money by National Treasury in an environment where there are scarce resources, and we fail as a department to spend that money appropriately. And I'm sure that the committee will have a lot of questions for officials today and for our entities today. And we should be in a position to share with you, Chairperson, what are some of the important steps that we are taking to mitigate against underperformance and underspending. Chairperson, in addition, therefore, a major focus has to be this year on ensuring that our environmental programs deliver the jobs that they are supposed to deliver. I think that this has been an area that has been responsible both for unfortunate audit outcomes and for underperformance. And so a third area of priority has to be on how we are going to ensure that our environmental programs significantly improves its performance in this financial year. Waste management is another area of deep concern. I think we are all very concerned about the weakness in the waste management sphere at local government level. We are also concerned about the weaknesses that provincial government have in supporting the local government sphere. And again, this is an area that has to receive attention this year, because I think that it is in the level of littering and inappropriate waste management in our country is something that is intolerable and is causing significant environmental damage. And it's something that we have also seen happening as a result of the flooding in KZN, and we are having to make necessary interventions in that province to support the waste management process. Of course, this year we are concluding the fishing rights allocation process, and I think it's important to say to honourable members that we have agreed as a result of representations from a number of the fishing industries that the appeals process is the process around application of or submission of appeals is extended by a month. We have agreed to that because many persons who wish to make appeals have indicated that with the combination of the long weekends and other information they require through the PIA process from the department, they will not be in a position to submit their appeals by the end of April, and we've agreed that we should give them until the end of May. This year also has to see the conclusion of their rights allocation process to small-scale fisheries in the Western Cape. This is a process that has been very long outstanding. Chairperson, I would want at this stage to also say that more attention will be given this year to the pakisas. The Oceans Pakisa is due to be finalized. The master plan is due to be finalized and approved by Cabinet. The forestry master plan has to go into full implementation in this financial year. And we also have to rework the biodiversity economy strategy so that it's in line with the recommendations of the high-level panel. So these areas where we have an overlap with economic activities will also be areas that will be receiving attention. Chair, it's a long day. There's a lot of detail that we have prepared for you. I would want to suggest perhaps that when the DG begins with the presentation, she might want to start at slide 17, because I think that I have tried to cover some of the earlier parts of the slides and the background. But let me pause there, Chairperson, and hand over to the Director General with your permission to do the input. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Over to you, DG.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister and Deputy Minister. Good morning, Honorable Chair and honorable members. I think Minister has already highlighted key areas of focus and priority for the department and where our focus will be in pursuit of the commitment made for this administration, but also on economy recovery and reconstruction program. What we have, Chair and honorable members, is then APP, which continues to align to the MTSF and also focus on economic growth, recovery, but also looking into areas where in the past we have not performed well as a department. And we note the concerns that Chairperson you're raising, and also the Minister has emphasized on that, where underperformance is not tolerated. So we have put in place measures to ensure that we deal with those areas, and we are hoping that the year 22-23 we will begin to show significant improvement in our performance as a department. Chairperson and honorable members, in this meeting I am with the heads of the various branches who then are going to be in a position to take the committee through the presentation in their various areas, what are the focus areas which are informing the broader priorities. And I will be handing over to them as soon as I've covered key aspects. Minister, I'm requesting that I just go through critical areas, which then the various branch managers are then going to expand on in terms of the actual outputs and the targets that we're setting for the department in as far as the performance is concerned, and how then this performance is going to be resourced. I will then come back at the end to highlight the budget that we have been allocated for the financial year 22-23, but also the rest of the MTF. Can I kindly just flag on those priorities? I will be very brief, Chairperson, starting from slide 13, and then I'll hand over to the project managers to then go into the details of the actual outputs. Starting with the first program, as already highlighted, Honorable Chair and members, as a department, we have not had a positive audit outcome. This continues to be the focus in ensuring that we pursue good governance in the department. Issues of compliance are a big issue, and we have put in place an audit improvement plan, and also are improving on our internal controls so that we begin to change the situation around. And this calls for a lot of change in as far as the culture of doing business in the department, but one can give an indication that we are moving towards that direction. The other critical aspect that I also want to highlight in this program, first program, program one, which is administration, is around the turnaround times. And that has actually been an issue in the past, especially around recruitment and filling in of vacancies. We do have a critical priority list that is then monitored on an ongoing basis in terms of critical positions that must be filled in the department. And also on the SCM procurement plan and readiness to implement programs in the year. We have that in place, and we are working on detailed terms of reference where 3 months before a commencement of the project, or even 3 to 4 months, the terms of reference must be in place, and those terms of reference must inform what then goes for the tendering process. Payment of service providers is something that we're continuing to pursue. We're not as yet at 100%. We're around 94, 95%, but it's something that we are pursuing. What is also critical on this program is representation in terms of employment equity, and that will then be highlighted by the program manager, branch manager, which is the DDG. On the second program, Chairperson, which is regulatory compliance, there it's very critical around also implementing the environmental compliance and enforcement strategy. We continue to pursue that to ensure that the compliance inspection are done across the country, but also where we have criminal investigation, those must be finalized. And we do take into account here that we do have dependencies in terms of other public bodies, but we working very closely with them on those matters. Critical is around the issue of the turnaround time and efficiency in processing the environmental impact assessment, where we are aiming that those must be processed. All of them must be processed within the stipulated timeframes. But we are also recognizing that those projects that are of strategic nature the SIP projects, then we need to try and shorten the period, and the program manager is going to talk to those elements. Going to program 3, I'm just highlighting and flagging, Chair. I think the Minister has already alluded to the Oceans Economy Master Plan. I won't touch on that, but what is key here also is the implementation of the Penguin Management Plan, which then has been consulted on with the various stakeholders, and we need to ensure that we implement that Penguin Management Plan. On climate change, I think also Minister has emphasized that this is key and a key priority where we really need to be accelerating mitigation measures for implementation towards the country's low emission development strategy. So that I'm not going to cover, but what is also critical in as far as this program is concerned is the climate bill, which Minister also has alluded to, and we are working to facilitate a workshop as requested by the portfolio committee in this regard. Just going into biodiversity and conservation, HLP Minister has highlighted. What we also want to highlight is the importance of the biodiversity strategy aligned to the HLP, but also the economy programs, because that is where then the issues of jobs, skills, and community development are actually emphasized. Environmental program, this is where our public employment is focusing, and also environmental related infrastructure program. This is a program that has had issues around the audit, and there's quite a number of measures in place that we are prioritizing project planning and implementation. Projects must be done on time, and they really need to be done within budget. And those are some of the measures that we are actually putting in place on the ground. And also payment of service providers within stipulated timeframes. The branch DDG will talk to the actual programs in terms of the outputs, in terms of their core responsibility, working on water and other EPWP, and ensuring that the EPWP program does emphasize on the youth and also empowering women in that regard. Climate change, program 7 is on chemical and waste management. In this regard, I think what is critical is implementation of the expanded producer responsibility, and also interventions in that is slide 16, interventions in relation to that. Key is also the issues of section 29, the industry waste tire management plan that really has been published. We have closed in terms of receiving comments, and we are actually going to be facilitating that implementation of that plan also needs to take place. Efficiencies around waste management licenses. Here we need to work very closely with our sister departments, the Department of Water and Sanitation, in order to ensure that we work within legislated timeframes. Support on local government, which is a matter that has been emphasized by Minister in terms of the current support that we need to be providing at a local government, especially around waste management training at a local government level, but also cleaning campaign. Forestry, we continue to pursue acceleration of the forestry master plan, and we are capacitating the implementation so that then there has to be tangible results in as far as the implementation plan is concerned, and also the greening program, where we do realize and recognize the challenge of the resources we have within the fiscus. Therefore, a need to pursue partnerships with other levels of government, but also with industry and civil society in as far as this is concerned. The last is the Fisheries Management, which its operations are funded through the Mlrf, and that will also then be presented by the DDG in the Fisheries Management branch. FREP conclusion, Minister has alluded to that. But what is key is also around enhancing compliance and enforcement interventions, and also how we begin to integrate and have integrated development support projects that are going to be focusing on your small-scale fishing cooperatives. With your permission, Chair, I'm going to request then the DDG to go through the details in line with our APP in terms of that. DDG Mashala is going to cover the first program. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and honorable members. My name is Mamukhadi Mashala. I'll take you through the priorities and our targets in terms of Program 1. We've got 4 outcomes on this particular program. The first one being that we want to ensure that we have good governance and compliance with legislative requirements, as well as effective financial management. Our main target in this particular financial year is to move from the qualified audit opinion to an unqualified external audit opinion. And secondly, we want to also prioritize expenditure to increase from the current 96 to a 98%. Our second outcome relates to the improvement that which we want to make on our contribution to socioeconomic transformation and empowerment of previously disadvantaged communities. We would want to have compliance with BBBEE in terms of procurements of our goods and services. Our target in this particular area is 65% compliant of expenditure being procured from level 1 to 8 BBBEE, as well as to actually have at least 30% of our expenditure coming from a majority of 51% owned female enterprises. In terms of the third outcome, which is about providing adequate skills and capacity in the workplace, whilst ensuring that we have representation, we target to recruit SMS members and move from the current 45% to a 78%, and to also have representation of people with disabilities at least 1.8%. The fourth and the last outcome, which is on improving the human resource capacity within the sector, we would want to prioritize creating a talent pipeline through the appointment of interns. We have targeted 212 interns with a representation of 50% women and 1.8 disability PWDs of the interns that which would have recruited. And over and above that, we also are targeting to issue bursaries to both internal and external beneficiaries, with 40 being full-time and 60 being part-time in that regard. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, HOD.
Thank you, Chair. That was program 1 in relation to the focused output. With your permission, I'm going to request DDG Banderman to take the committee through the deliverables for program 2.
Good morning, honorable members, chairperson, minister, deputy minister, DG, and all other members. I'm not going to go into detail. DG has already alluded to the number of environmental authorizations for inspection for compliance. I just would like to highlight that these are the minimum in terms of the annual target. We do strive to achieve more in terms of our compliance, as well as our criminal cases. The number of administrative enforcement notices issued for non-compliance is as indicated at 260. Inspections conducted for verification, we have 65 as a target. However, we do try to achieve more than that. If we can move to the next slide. In terms of the intervention for streamlining environmental authorization and management, we have the amended electricity grid infrastructure standard, which we as a target to be gazetted for public comments. This standard tries to minimize and to reduce the timelines in terms of environmental authorization. So it's actually critical for the implementation of streamlining environmental authorizations to address our energy issues. In terms of number of officials trained in environmental compliance and enforcement, we have 450 as a target. In terms of complaints and incidences reported, our service standard is 20 days. However, depending on the urgency and the type of complaints, we often attend to these urgently, and the dates are normally less than 20 days. Our target in that regard is 95%. In terms of environmental impact management applications for priority projects, as DG has indicated, due to the current energy crisis and in terms of the post-COVID recovery initiatives, we have a service standard of 45 days. Which is not legislated. It is something that we strive to achieve, and we have set the annual target at 100% in that regard. We are also working closely with the presidential task team to look at how to streamline and to reduce the timeframes where we can, while still ensuring sustainable development, specifically in terms of strategic infrastructure projects. The percentage of national environmental impact management applications. We have applications which, in terms of your strategic environmental assessment corridors, which we've looked at 57 days. Other applications are 107 days, and this is an annual target of 100%. We work closely with the provincial authorities in terms of monitoring to ensure that we all are able to meet these timeframes, and we collaborate closely in that regard. Next slide. From my side, DG, these are the priority, and our priority is to try and look at streamlining environmental authorizations and also ensure that our enforcement and compliance strategy is finalized within this financial year. Thank you, DG.
Thank you very much, Chair. With your permission, now on oceans and coasts, Advocate Radia Razak is going to take the committee through the focus areas and the actual targets for oceans and coasts. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. Good morning, Honourable Chair, Honourable members, and all participating today. If I could just look at, Minister mentioned the ocean economy. Those are one of the key areas which is not necessarily featured here, but we've got our monitoring report on the implementation of prioritized stabilization of the interventions in the 5 ocean economy PISA subsectors compiled for this coming year. We are looking at the marine manufacturing repairs, marine transport, aquaculture, fisheries, offshore oil and gas. And these are underway. The master plan has been drafted. It's been a co-creation with all relevant role players. We have on our program the water quality monitoring program. And with water quality monitoring, we are doing trend reports for 35 priority areas in the 4 coastal provinces. Of course, we use water quality monitoring information for a variety of programs. So it's a supportive program. And for the coming year, we're looking at compiling 35 priority areas within the coastal areas, within the 4 coastal provinces, although we've pitched it at 30, but we're aiming at 35. There's a lot of the different aspects around water quality monitoring that affects, for example, estuary management. It feeds into a lot of our pollution functions, all our biodiversity and conservation aspects in marine and coastal, and it's a very important aspect of the support programs towards that. On the marine spatial planning and governance systems, it's an ongoing program that has been long in the making. We've had the bill and the act passed, and now we're trying to get the systems and the institutions up and running. Because obviously we have a huge EEZ, and the spatial mapping for such a large area will have to be done in sizable portions. One of the first and the key aspects for us in developing our plan towards managing these conflicting uses within marine spatial planning area is to create sector plans, and these sector plans have to be submitted by the participating departments. Of course, we have our institutional arrangements that go right up and up to the political level, and at the working level, we're trying to get, at the operational level, we are planning on getting 7 of these sector plans submitted for approval to the DG and the DG committee. This will stand us in good stead to start looking at how we can then integrate these various activities from the different sectors. We have the MPAs, which is always a focus for us. There are 2 draft MPAs for, and pardon the old name, which is Port Elizabeth Corals. In fact, we are in the process of, because this was declared prior to the name change, we are in the process of amending the regulations. We've just approached legal services to assist us in changing it to let the name correctly reflect for these particular MPAs, for this particular MPA, and we've also got the Agulhas Front MPA. So those are the 2 draft management plans that are being planned. We're doing this incrementally. As you've been aware, we've been doing 2 per year. It's a long, arduous process to actually get a management plan in place because it's quite expensive, and there's a lot of assessment that needs to be done in order to do something effectively and to make sure that these plans are meaningful and not just paper plans. So we've got the 2 plans for the upcoming year. If you can go to the next, the number of biodiversity plans. As you're aware, we have these biodiversity management plans, and one of the key ones on our priority, you've heard about the penguin management plan, which is also being done this year, or finalized this year. We also have draft shark biodiversity management plan. And the shark management plan is, in addition to the penguin management plan, are being planned for finalization for this for this year. Just to give you a little feedback on the penguin management plan, which was raised by DG specifically, we've had a lot of challenges around that, which we have now come to a point of ironing out. We've consulted effectively with the CAF so that we're sure that the biodiversity and the fisheries aspects are talking to each other and that they are more aligned. And that's in the process of being finalized as we speak. And we also have plans to publish for implementation the penguin and shark management plans this year. If we go to estuarine management, on estuarine management, we've got these 4 national estuaries which we are responsible for coordinating and implementing, and they have been in various stages. So every year we have an annual implementation plan, and there's various action plans that are planned for each estuary. You'll see all of those listed there: the Buffalo, Durban Bay, Richards Bay, and Orange River estuary. And they have a variety of activities ranging from tourism related to water quality monitoring to a certain biodiversity inputs, etc. And each estuary is unique, so they have very different approaches and plans, and so each one of them will still be continuing. We'll still be continuing in these implementation and monitoring of each of these estuaries annually, as we will for the forthcoming year and the years thereafter. Finally, the Antarctic strategy, the implementation, you'll recall in 2021, the strategy was finalized and endorsed and approved, and we are in implementation phase now. The whole of last year, that the institutional arrangements and so forth were being implemented and laid and rolled out. For the 2022-23 here, our Antarctic Strategy Outreach Program is being planned for approval, and then in the years following, for the program activities being implemented. And these programs, because they're multi-departmental and multi-sectoral as well, requires a high level of coordination and agreement, and that has been working well so far. I think that's it. If we go to the next slide, it would be research. On our research programs, you'll see we're looking at obviously the areas around increasing our protection area and looking for that additional 5% of ocean and coastal protection, including the guidelines on expansion, which is something that's being worked on. And then, of course, within the research component is the peer-reviewed publications are an important component, and these include thesis and research policy reports and so forth. There are 20 that are planned for the upcoming year. And then we've got the relief voyages, the core relief voyages, and they often lead to misunderstanding. It's just a term that has been used historically for the voyages that are undertaken to our remote stations, Gulf and Marion Islands, and the Antarctic program. So we annually have 3 of these, and these 3 are being planned again for next year. These are a lot more administratively burdensome than meets the eye, because it involves a lot of logistics, as well as planning, both from the practical and logistics perspective, as well as the scientific perspective. And we also have many partners in SANBI that contribute towards this program. The annual science report card on essential ocean and coast variables was published 2021, and what we need to do the annual report again for 2022, and the plan is that we are to be on board with all of our essential criteria and the information needed. So we're all ready and geared to be continuing with that. The next slide, I think we're at the end of the presentation. No, not yet. Oh yes, the permitting, my apologies. We have a lot of regulatory normal authorizations happening within oceans and coasts. And you'll see we've got our percentages there. Our annual targets are mostly at 100%. We have an issue with the 95% on the MPA targets. We're trying to improve that, and we're working towards getting to capacity building in that particular area to ensure that we can reach the 100% target there. We've got a percentage for the other permits that are issued are the marine research permits, and those are done in collaboration with the fisheries research people where there are aspects that overlap. The normal 90-day service standard applies. We've not been having challenges with that. They have a committee that meets and finalizes these permits. And then we've got the off-road vehicle permits. These are, remember that driving on the beach is not generally allowed. There are exceptions, and those are specifically as they relate to people with disabilities. And when it relates to people who have rights in terms of the Marine Living Resources Act to drive on the beach to collect seaweed, for example, or for boat launching and that kind of thing. So they apply for permits. Those are issued, and they're usually on time. And then we've got dumping permits as, again, there are international guidelines which we are bound by, being parties to the London Protocol, which we have written into the legislation. And we allow very limited type of dumping, and a lot of this relates mostly to dredging in harbors and so forth, and the sediment that's dug up and having to be dumped somewhere. We make sure that the levels are appropriate and so forth, and we have long-term permits for TNPA, and occasionally we'll get dumping permits from outside of the TNPA, but these are, again, few and far between, and we've got those under control. And I think I've mentioned the permitting for marine protected areas. Next slide. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. On climate change and air quality, I have Mr. Jongikaya. Jongikaya, yes, to take the committee through. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, DG. Good morning, Honorable Chair and members, to the Minister, Deputy Minister, DG, and colleagues. Yes, I'll be going through some of our indicators and targets for this current financial year. We'll start with climate change, and in particular, there are two areas of interest for us. One is climate change mitigation, and there we have three interventions that are linked to it. This is, of course, related to how we reduce greenhouse gas emissions and the instruments we use to achieve that. There are two instruments that we are using. One is the carbon budgets that we allocate to industry. So this is essentially allocating emission limits or greenhouse gas emission limits to industry. As you'll appreciate, members, honorable members, last year we were granted cabinet approval for the methodology to achieve this process, and we are now piloting it with industry sectors, and that's the process we'll be undertaking. And then on the sectoral emission targets, or what we call sets for short, there are two sets that we'll be allocating. One is what we call environmental sets. These are sectoral emission targets that are related to the environmental sector, and we frame them as such because they are, in essence, what is under our control is the environmental department, and this will be looking at developing targets, for example, for forestry, for waste, for biodiversity, and for hazardous chemicals, and so on. So that's the one area. The other area is in other sectors, so for example, energy, mineral resource, transport, agriculture, trade and industry, and human settlements. So we will be making use of the existing policies and measures in those policy space to determine what targets should be allocated for those sectors. So that's the focus on the mitigation of climate change. Then on the adaptation of climate change, honorable members, you'll realize that in 2020, we were granted approval of our national adaptation strategy. Since then, we have shifted gears more towards implementation. And our targets in this financial year are looking at two areas. One is the implementation of adaptation intervention. We have specific programs, one along the garden route, where we are looking at developing early fire detection and management systems that will be installed in those areas, as this is one of the major risks that we face with the rapidly changing climate, and also the need to monitor some of the hazards that are related to climate and weather. And as such, in the area of Mzinyati, we are looking at installation of automated weather stations to monitor, in particular, lightning and heavy rain. We are also engaging and supporting specific sectors with the implementation of their sector adaptation sector plans. Our focus in this current financial year is supporting human settlements as they are looking at developing the National Climate Risk and Vulnerability Assessment for 5 of their key priority areas. Then in terms of mitigating threats on environmental quality and in particular human health, we have what we call the National Air Quality Indicator, which gives an indication of how bad the air quality is and to what an extent it can affect human health. If this indicator is less than 1, it signifies that there's less threat to human health. If it's above 1 or above 1, it implies that there is serious threat to human health. So the target for this current financial year is to keep that indicator below 1. Then we also, of course, to inform this indicator, we also need to ensure that we generate good quality air quality data from all the monitoring stations that we manage. So the target around that is all the monitoring stations that are in priority areas, such as the Vaal Triangle, the Highveld, as well as the Waterberg. We have a total of about 15 air quality monitoring stations in those. There is to make sure that we have data recovery of 75%, which will ensure that we have good quality data. We can move to the next slide. Of course, in order to facilitate implementation of green initiatives and climate-related initiatives, we also have an indicator around leveraging and mobilization of financial resources, largely through a number of avenues, such as multilateral, bilateral, and also established climate funding institutions. The target that we have for that is to mobilize around $60 million US dollars for this current financial year. And then we can move to the next one. The last one is around processing of atmospheric emission licenses. Here, the standard service days for full processing of atmospheric emission licenses is 60 days. And our target is to make sure that for all the applications that we receive, we adhere to that 60-day period for all the applications, hence the 100% target. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Indeed.
Thank you, Chairperson. Our next program is Biodiversity and Conservation, and DDG Hotla will take the committee through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DG. Good morning, Chair, members, Minister, Deputy Minister, DG colleagues, and also colleagues from the entities. In Program 5, our first indicator is around ensuring that we increase the number of hectares added to the conservation estate, and our target in that regard is 610,674 hectares of land added to conservation estate. And then the next target relates to improving management effectiveness, and we will be developing improvement plans of management authorities monitored on an annual status report compiled. So we'll provide a status report on implementation of committed improvement plans. And then the next target relates to, the next indicator relates to the number of interventions to ensure conservation of strategic water sources and wetlands implemented. We have 2 interventions. One relates to designation of 1 Ramsar site, and the other one relates to securing 5 strategic water source areas. And then in respect of ensuring that we manage the threats of, mitigate the threats to biodiversity, on this one, we will be developing a regulatory tool to ensure conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. And the target in that respect is to produce a national assessment report on the linkages between migration, desertification, land degradation, and drought. And this will be approved by a MINMEC. Next slide. Then moving further is to implement recommendations of the high-level panel in interventions on biodiversity. Our target in this respect is to ensure that the white paper on conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity is adopted by Parliament. And secondly, that the National Biodiversity Economy Strategy will be revised, including the transformation elements. And then on improved access, fair and equitable sharing of benefits. On this one, we will be implementing biodiversity economy initiatives, and there will be 3 programs that we are implementing or initiatives. The first one relates to the creation of 800 jobs, and the second one relates to training 200 biodiversity beneficiaries, and in this respect is accredited training, and also the donation of 300 heads of games to PDIs and communities. And then the next one relates to benefit sharing agreements approved. We target to have 5 of those agreements approved. Then the next slide relates to our operational environment where we process applications, looking at CITES permits assessed and decision issued within prescribed timeframes. We intend to keep the service standards of 25 days and process 100% of those permits. The next one relates to TOPS permits that are assessed. Also, this is the same service standard of 25 days with an annual target of 100%. Thank you. I think this is the last slide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Immediately, let me hand over to DDG Kiza for environmental programs. Thank you.
Good morning, Honorable Chair, members, Minister, Deputy Minister, DG, and colleagues. In terms of the priorities or the focus for Program 6, which is the environmental programs, we aim to create 28,728 full-time equivalents associated with the number of work opportunities. There is 62,264. These full-time equivalents and the work opportunities will be created through implementing a range of programs, which I'm going to talk to further down in my presentation. One of also the our indicators is to make sure that we are able to ensure that 16,872 participants of our programs complete accredited training programs. In line with what I'd highlighted earlier, where the work opportunities will be created, one of the focus areas is the Working For programs. In this case, I'll start with the Working For Water program, wherein we aim to clear 127,127 initial hectares. And the follow-up clearing is targeting 457,607 follow-up hectares. For wetland rehabilitation as part of the Working For Wetlands program, we are targeting 100 wetlands for the financial year. And also as part of our biodiversity infrastructure program, we'll be looking at cleaning 2,116 kilometers of accessible coastline. Next slide, please. In line with our focus and the mandate as per National Field and Forest Fires Act, we aim to suppress 90% of fires through our Working on Fire program. And also in terms of our biodiversity infrastructure, adaptation and disaster risk reduction, we aim to construct a total of 22 biodiversity infrastructure buildings that will then mean that 10 will be constructed and 12 renovated in the financial year. And in terms of overnight visitor and staff accommodation units constructed, the target is 20. And as per our commitment in terms of the ERRP, we will be constructing 3 buyback centers and renovating 1, in line with the indicator on the number of buyback centers constructed or renovated. in terms of ensuring that we contribute towards improving human resources capacity for the sector, we will place 400 students with host employers as part of our cooperation or collaboration with our sector stakeholders to ensure that the students that are placed with host employers will be able to complete their environmental qualifications as stated above. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. Our next presenter is the acting DDG, Mr. Mokoena, on chemical and waste management.
Thank you very much, DG. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, Minister and Deputy Minister. On Program 7, we have the output indicators as indicated largely around legislative and regulatory instruments developed and implemented, where we have our annual targets being the instruments. One, the regulations to ban mercury-containing products, as well as the regulations for prior informed consent to be amended and published for implementation. And we have the percentage decrease in the hydrochlorofluorocarbon consumptions, as well as the target on the HCFCs being the reduction of the consumption by 45%, and also indicated the tonnages with regard to this, as well as the number of waste management legislative instruments developed and implemented, where we're looking at 2 instruments again. Here, one being the notice of intention for the Section 18 on extended producer responsibility for waste oil, pesticides, and batteries to be finalized, published for implementation. The National Environmental Management Waste Act, Industry Waste Management Plan, as Minister and DG has alluded to this earlier on. Thank you. The next slide. Thank you. The amount of waste diverted from landfill, largely looking at prioritized waste streams, the paper and packaging, we're looking at 60%. This year, e-waste 10%, lighting 12%, in line with the already approved Section 18 EPR plans or notices for implementation. The number of tonnages of waste tasks processed, this is linked to the Section 29 Industry Waste Management Plan, and we're looking at 27.2 thousand tons per annum diverted from going to landfill. The outcomes in terms of the adequate capacity at local government sphere, as DG and Minister has indicated, it's also broken down in terms of the annual targets, where we saying for municipal councillors and officials training, we're looking at 300 officials as well as municipal councillors. The municipal cleaning campaigns to be conducted, about 16 to be conducted, taking into account those that also relates to the current activities on the cleanups, the waste license applications, as also highlighted earlier on by DG, for prioritization of the applications in this financial year. The target is 95% to be done within the legislated timeframes, as well as the remediation orders also finalized within timeframes, 95%. and we are indicating the actual number of standard days or service standard days, which is 90 days for the remediation orders, as well as 107 for the waste licenses. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Can I request Phumeza, Ms. Phumeza Nodada, to take us through forestry management?
Thank you, DG. Good morning to the Honorable Chair and honorable members, Minister, Deputy Minister, and colleagues. In terms of forestry, we have 4 outcomes. The first one deals with a sustainable production of state forests, where we want to make sure that there is replanting of the temporarily unplanted areas with a target of 1,800 hectares. And linked to that would be ensuring that there is weeding, pruning, and thinning of the areas that have been planted through the silvicultural practices with a target of 2,100 hectares. Then in terms of the state nurseries that we manage, 3 nurseries have been targeted for refurbishment. One in the Western Cape, Worsley, one in Limpopo, and one in the Free State, and so that there can be an improvement in terms of production in those nurseries. Then in terms of the master plan, the acceleration of the master plan, as indicated by the Minister and the DG at the beginning of the presentation, we want to make sure that there is handing over of the plantations to communities, and there's a target of 4 of these plantations to ensure that there is a transformation taking place within the sector. Linked to that would be the post-settlement support strategy implementation, where we want to make sure that the communities are supported as they manage the plantations. In the next slide, we focus on the indigenous forests, where we want to make sure that there is management and regulation happening in those indigenous forests that we manage as a department. Here we want to deal with the mapping of the units within these forest patches, and also making sure that there is rehabilitation of those indigenous forests in terms of clearing of invasive alien plants, where there's a target of 200 hectares. Then in terms of our contribution towards the 2 million tree planting, where we want to make sure that there is 120,000 trees that we are able to plant internally. And then we'll also collaborate with the other stakeholders in terms of planting the other areas within the country. And then on the last slide, we're looking at the license applications in terms of Section 7, 15, and 23 of the Act, where we would want to process them within 100% of them within the 90-day standard. These licenses deal with issues related to access for communities in different aspects, such as for fuel wood or for collection of medicinal plants. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. Now it's the last program, Program 9, Fisheries Management. However, this will potentially be a duplication with what appears on Mlrf, Chair. So I'm not quite sure whether we cover Mlrf now or we then conclude this presentation with the fisheries management, and we'll go to Mlrf thereafter.
I think you can then deal with also Mlrf so that we conclude on yourselves once and for all.
Okay. No, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Can I request that DDG Sue Middleton take us through this part, and then the other presentation be brought so that we can then conclude Mlrf. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. Good morning, Honourable Chair, Honourable Members, Minister, DM, and public entities. I'm going to take you through Programme 9, which, as DG has indicated, is a duplicate with the MLRF. So when I come to the MLRF, I'll just highlight the differences. In terms of the aquaculture regulatory framework, we aim to take the Aquaculture Development Bill through the parliamentary process this year. As you know, the Cabinet has approved the National Freshwater Inland Wild Capture Fisheries Policy for implementation, and this year we will be developing the implementation plan for approval. The next few targets talk to our monitoring, control and surveillance work, our anti-poaching activities. And the first one is to conduct 5,500 inspections in the 6 key priority fisheries, namely hake, abalone, rock lobster, lionfish, squid, and pelagics. We also aim to conduct 290 verifications of right holders to ensure that they are complying with their permit conditions. I'll just skip one and go to the West Coast rock lobster anti-poaching strategy, which is also part of the monitoring, control and surveillance work. And there we are looking at developing a particular focused West Coast rock lobster anti-poaching strategy for approval by the Minister in order to assist rebuilding this depleted fishery. And then we aim to have the implementation plan for the National Plan of Action on Sharks approved. Next slide, please. As DG and Minister said in their introductory remarks, a key focus this coming year will be on the small-scale fisheries, whereby we aim to complete the allocation of fishing rights to small-scale fishing cooperatives in the Western Cape. As you will be aware, small-scale fishing rights have been allocated in the other 3 coastal provinces, and we want to complete the Western Cape by the end of this calendar year. And in support of the small-scale fishing program, we also aim to pilot an integrated and comprehensive development support program for small-scale fishing cooperatives. And this year we will be piloting that in 20 cooperatives. That's the end of the fisheries presentation.
So you're loading the MLRF one.
Yes, Chair, we are requesting that she continues on the MLRF. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So if I could ask Secretariat, there we go. Now, as indicated, the Fisheries branch reports into the National Department as Programme 9, which I've just taken you through. But we are also a Schedule 3A public entity, which was established in terms of the Marine Living Resources Act, Section 10. And as a public entity, we are required to table a separate APP as the MLRA. We are also required to table a separate audited financial statement, and we are audited separately from the department as the MLRF. The next few bullet points just speak to the mandate of the MLRF, which is to ensure the sustainable management and utilization of marine living resources and to build the development of the aquaculture sector. And a new mandate is to manage inland and freshwater fisheries. This is a new mandate. Historically, we've normally focused on the marine space. And the money that we generate from own revenue is used to cover the operational costs of the operational expenses of the fisheries branch, whereas our salaries are paid by the National Department. I'm going to skip the constraints and challenges and go to slide 4, which, as you see, I've already taken you through. If we can go to the next slide. That is the same as in Program 9. If we can go to slide 6. The only difference between the Mlrf APP and that of Program 9 within the department are the last two there, which are the number of full-time equivalents created, which is 279, and 600 work opportunities created through the Working for Fisheries program. And as I say, in the national program, these job figures are reported under Program 6, but in the Mlrf, they are reported separately because we manage the funds through the Mlrf. And if we can go to the last slide, which is the budget for the Mlrf, we have a total budget of 453 million and broken down into covering the operational expenses of the various components and chief directorates. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. With your indulgence, there's one slide on the budget, which I would like to then talk to as part of concluding our presentation for the department in the previous presentation.
Yes, proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Can I request Secretariat just to bring it back and go to the last slide on the budget for the department? Thank you very much, Chair. So this is the budget for the next 3 years for the department as allocated by National Treasury, and also of focus is the year 22-23, where as a department we have an allocated budget of 8.9 billion. And out of this, we do then fund the entities, and also we, in the various programs, under climate change, in that 470 million, there's an allocation going through to source, and biodiversity, the allocation going through to SANParks, SANBI, and Isimangaliso. We also have programs on EP, which are also then implemented by the entities. So that's what we want to just share with the committee. This is our overall budget for 22-23, 8.9. And you'll note that in the year that follows, given the fiscal constraint, the budget has not been increased. So we are then going to have 8.9 billion for the middle year, only in the outer year, which will obviously be considered with an inflationary indicated amount, which gives us 9.3 billion for the outer year. So those are the resources that are going to be resourcing the plans that we have for the department. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, DG. Colleagues, that's the presentation from the department. Can I get a show of hands of colleagues who want to interact with the department's presentation? The first hand I'm noting is for Honorable Paulsen. You're going to be followed by Honorable Bryant. Then it's going to be Honorable Phillips. Yeah, those are the three hands thus far. Over to you, Honorable Paulsen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the department for the presentation. And Chairperson, since the Minister raised this matter, I'm going to want a response to my question from the Minister. Minister, when we do weather forecasts, meteorologists usually give us an indication of weather patterns for a period of time. And what we've witnessed about a week ago or a few days ago, over 400 lives have been lost and many more are still missing. And much of this, I believe, could have been avoided if we were proactive instead of adopting a wait-and-see approach. And I'd like to know, going forward, will there be a process in place whereby the South African Weather Services monitors possible severe weather conditions, informs your office and you, Minister, take it upon yourself and inform Cabinet that we should be on high alert and act accordingly and prevent or reduce the risk of loss of life. And then my next question on Program 5. When it comes to protection or protected areas or conservation areas, and these are often established on land formerly owned or occupied by local communities. And these communities were frequently displaced, denied access to resources upon which they were dependent, and seldom benefited from the establishment of such areas. So conservation to many of our communities therefore have come to be regarded as an elitist concern, the preserve of privileged members of society, and protected areas the playgrounds for the privileged elite. So I would like to know, going forward, will the department adopt a more human-centered approach to natural resource management and get consensus from communities as to how and where these protected areas should be, and to how the communities will be compensated for their loss in the interest of that particular area. And then Program 9, the DG says that overfishing is a concern. But yet, in the recent FRAP, which is not yet concluded, which we are now in the appeals process, and could possibly end up in court and the entire FRAP being interdicted, or FRAP outcome could be interdicted because of the injustice done to indigenous fishers. So I want to ask, if overfishing is such a huge concern to this department, how does it explain the increasing allocations of big fishing companies, namely Oceana, compared to the reducing the amount of new entrants? How does the department explain this injustice if it is so concerned about overfishing? Surely Oceana's got all the technology at their means, and a new entrant has got maybe a boat or access to a boat and just wants to get started. But yet the monopoly of big fishing companies over our marine resources, which are public resources and should be for public benefit, is being monopolized by these big companies. How does the department explain this? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
You, Honorable Paulson. Over to you, Honorable Branch.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And thank you for the presentations to the officials concerned. I'd just like to start by alluding to some of the things that the Minister mentioned during her opening address. I think all the points that she raised on those target areas that were mentioned, the landfills, environmental jobs, climate change and climate resilience, getting that bill sorted, the HLP recommendations, failure to spend, getting FRAP resolved, and the small scale rights. Those are all things that we would 100% support her on, and ensure that, in ensuring that those are followed through and achieved. Some of them do seem as if they have been dragging on for far too long. And I think there is an analogy that we could draw here. One talks around, when we speak of climate change, these two approaches of adaptation and mitigation. And as the Minister correctly says, when it comes to climate change, the most urgent priority for us at the moment is actually adaptation, because things are moving so fast, as we've seen in KZN recently. But if we apply the same rationale to the way that officials are carrying out their duties within the department, I think we have taken a kind of adaptation approach there as well, where we thought, let's see how we can adapt to the fact that we have consistently low performing officials in many of these departments, instead of doing what we should do, which is mitigate and put proper consequence management in place, so that officials who are not performing and are not performing for the people of South Africa, which is what they're supposed to be doing, are taken to task, and likewise that our good top performing officials are properly recognized and promoted for the good work that they are doing. Chair, in terms of Program 1, I didn't see very much there in terms of consequence management, and I think there are very admirable goals in terms of the promotion of diversity and transformation. But where is the consequence management? Because at the end of the day, we need to have properly functioning departments, that should be the core driver. To make sure that we're hitting those targets, and there are many targets that we're not hitting within the department. Just a quick one, if possible, and maybe this can be an appeal going forward to the other presenters at a later stage. We talk a lot in acronyms. Not all of us are affair with all of the different acronyms that are being used, and there were one or two that I did miss. I think one was EEZ or EEZ, which I've worked out, I think is Economic Exclusion Zone, but I'm not sure. But if we can just try, if possible, for us layman politicians, just to make sure that those acronyms are spelt out. In terms of Program 3, no mention of offshore wind again. Mention of offshore gas and oil, but no mention of offshore wind programs. Is this something that the department is going to be looking into and promoting, especially if we're talking about climate change, and finding ways to adapt and mitigate going forward? Where is the mention of offshore wind? Nothing. That really needs to be something that gets factored in. In terms of the climate change adaptation strategies, so I'd like to ask the officials concerned if they're aware of a report which I think was titled the Durban Climate Action Plan, which was developed in terms of Durban's membership of C40. And that management plan specifically stipulated on numerous occasions the increased flood risk in KZN and Durban, and particularly the flood risk for poor and marginalized communities. Now, I know the city of Durban, from what I can understand, was supposed to follow through on some of those recommendations. But was the National Department aware of this report and the recommendations that were made in terms of this report, specifically with regards to flooding and the recommendations that were made to address the potential devastating consequences of large-scale flooding? And if so, were steps taken to address this, and what were those steps? Is there coordination between the local government there and national government in terms of addressing these issues? Because if not, then all of these strategies and plans that are being put together are useless because there's no proper follow-through. So I just want to find out a little bit more about that. In terms of Program 5, the HLP White Paper, this is really central. I know the Minister, thank you very much, responded to one of my questions in terms of lion ranching in particular, and to say that the white paper would be published with immediate effect in the Government Gazette. I'm just wondering if that has been published yet, and if not, when it's going to be published, and if we could have sight of it as well as a portfolio committee, because that's obviously going to dictate the way forward in terms of policy and how those involved in the sector, whether we regard them as goodies or baddies, depending on where you sit in this issue, they are individuals who are now looking after environmental resources and animals, and they are desperate to learn the way forward in terms of what they're expected to do, particularly when it comes to whether or not and how to euthanize animals. Very, very delicate topic. In terms of Program 8, I don't know if I missed it, perhaps, but I didn't see anything there in terms of the prevention of illegal land invasions on plantations and forestry sites. This is becoming an increasing challenge for the department, and I hope that there's a strategy in place to ensure that that is addressed. And then lastly, just in terms of fishing, it's a very, very sad situation at the moment with regards to so many traditional fishing communities who unfortunately were not successful during this first round of the FRAP process, many of whom come from families who have been fishing for generations. I spoke to a 5th generation fisherman the other day with boats and a family that is built around fishing. And due to some bureaucratic snag within the application process, he has been locked out. And there are many others like him. And we're seeing this taking place in our traditional coastal communities. And at the same time, we are seeing labor brokers from Joburg getting fishing rights. Something doesn't make sense there. And we sincerely hope that the Minister is going to look at these appeals. I know, Minister, you can't speak on them at the moment, and I understand that, but I sincerely hope that you are going to cast a very objective eye over those appeals when they come through, because many of these people are now staring down the barrel of bankruptcy and economic destitution due to the fact that they've been unable to get their rights in place. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, Honorable Bryant. Honorable Phillips, over to you.
Good morning once again, everyone, and thank you for the presentation. I have a few questions, and then I also have some comments. Honorable Bryant has covered some of my questions. On slide 13, what I'd like to know is, of the 46 criminal investigations, did any of them concern illegal mining? And if so, if I could have details about that, or not just mining, but also the illegal processing of minerals. And of the 46 criminal investigations, do we have any guilty verdicts? And then the verification of inspections for the rhino horn and elephant tusks, what were the results? Was everything in order? Was the infantry missing? That would be great. And then the penguin management plan, I seem to have missed that one. So if there is a copy of it, I would love to have a copy if that is possible. And then I see there's also a shark management plan. And what I'd like to raise here is that I don't see anything about a baboon management plan. And many of the baboons on the Cape Peninsula actually originate in the Table Mountain National Park. And the onus for managing those baboons sort of falls to Cape Nature or to the Cape of Good Hope SPCA, whereas those baboons are in fact the responsibility of the Table Mountain National Park. So I would very much like to know what the department's standing is on having some kind of baboon management policy for that area. The working on water on slide 15, what kind of oversight is carried out on that? We recently had a team in Rustenburg that was an unmitigated disaster. They cut down some huge Spanish reeds. They left it in a pile under a tree, which caused a fire hazard. And the reeds were not eradicated. They've actually grown back more vigorously. So I'd just like to know what kind of oversight is conducted on this working on water. And then the waste management licenses. What is happening to towns that don't have licensed waste landfill sites? I've got one in my constituency that I'm actually concerned about. Just a comment on slide 18, the current admin and your goal is 80% plus should be, that is the goal. And for a administration on a parliamentary level, I would have thought that 80% plus is actually a minimum requirement and should actually be there, not something that needs to be reported back or a goal set. Slide 22, how many staff are available at present to do the compliance inspections? Program 3, slide 26, the National Oceans Quality Management. Please can I have a list of the 30 priority areas that are being monitored? Then a comment on the Antarctic Strategy Outreach Program. Could we perhaps just have some more information about that? An outreach program in Antarctic sounds very interesting. Then the air quality management stations. Do we have any in the Rustenburg area that is monitored nationally? On slide 35, we are very concerned at the moment. We've got the Magalies biosphere, and there's a constant onslaught on this biosphere by companies applying for prospecting or mining rights. Is the department helping the local NGOs, NPOs, and residents in any way to fight off this constant onslaught by these mining companies? And then on slide 52, on the chemical waste management, is there an approximate amount of how much the department contributed to the chemicals collection in the collection pond from UPL that has since just washed into the sea? Thank you so much, Chair. I appreciate the questions.
Thank you so much, Honorable Phillips. Yes. From my side, I want to raise some of these issues. When one goes through the budget transfers to entities from Vote 22 for the year 2022 to 2023, it amounted to 1.971 billion. Then the issues that one want to raise with regard to this, you go through the 2021-22 financial year, plans were underway to get all the departmental entities to be financially sustainable. by generating their own revenue instead of relying on the national budget. DG, maybe you can update us on the progress made, because all the entities reporting to this department have the capacity, if not the potential, to raise their revenues. And then on that, DG, again, one believes there has to be a clear roadmap for dealing with matters of irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure in these entities, considering the prevailing physical constraints in the public sector. Then, based on the quarterly report, issues relating to irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure will be a thing of the past, because the matters raised by the AG were addressed and capacity built, particularly in the supply chain management function. Then the issue that one wants clarity from you, DG, is the implementation of the AG fundings, as most were at advanced stages of implementation, meaning that the department will get a clean audit during the 2022-23 financial year. That's the question that I want to raise in relation to also having considered those quarterly reports that were presented to us. Then on administration, I'm gonna also refer to the previous one, because I've taken them to so also to check on the progress. During the 2021 allocation, there was around 185 million reduction from the office accommodation in light of the upcoming vaccine rollout that may require some level of return to offices. Then one wants to know now how much is allocated towards office accommodation now that there is an expectation that officials should return to work in offices. Then also to understand whether the officials are going to be expected to be back in the office or just a specific number. Is it all official or a specific number? That's the issue that I want to understand that. And then on this program, administration, you're planning to spend at least 65% of your expenditure budget on BBBEE compliant companies. Yet, your projected performance for the 2021-22 financial year is 90% of overall expenditure being BBBEE compliant companies. Then now, one wants to understand what are the reasons for setting the target so low when over the past 3 financial years, the achievement have always been above 75%. Then the other critical issue when it deals with your administration, Treasury is expecting yourselves as departments to reduce expenditure on personnel and operational costs so that funds can be redirected to more urgent priorities and operational costs for the development purposes. Then it will be prudent for us to understand here from your side as a department, which functional areas have you have identified and where savings can be made. And then all the funded posts verified to be occupied by active personnel, not ghost workers, because it's happening in other departments. And then in the 2022-23 budget document from National Treasury, then when you read that document, we find that yourselves as a department, you have estimated 3,828 personnel posts at the end of the 2021 financial year, while your current APP, the 2022-23 APP, it shows that there were 3,768 personnel posts at the end of December 2021. Maybe DG, you can explain the difference in the total number of personnel posts between December 2021 and end of March 2022, since both figures are supplied by the department. And then it will be prudent for you to tell us actually what is the correct number of personnel posts, irrespective of whether occupied or vacant as per 1st April 2022. With regard to the program on regulatory compliance, you go back to the year 2021-22 financial years, there was a significant increase in the budget allocation for the RCSM management. However, you look now on the 2022-23 allocation, it shows a significant reduction. And then maybe one will want to understand what are the drivers of such reduction in the RCSM management. Then the department, you have also removed the target on the Rhino on data management system, which was going to be used to objectively report on whether the rhino's population is increasing or not. Maybe you should make us understand what is the reason for removing this target in the 2022-23 APP. And then this is also to add on what Honorable Phillips was saying, to say, does this mean that the development, testing, and deployment of the system has been concluded, or this has been abandoned? Because it's either two ways. And then I think we should also then say it's commendable that some targets were adjusted upwards in program 2 in line with the previous performance. And we want to commend you for that, DG and the team. And this approach, we are of the view that it should be adopted by other branches in the department. If they can do the same, it's gonna be very good also. And then on the issue of the compliance and enforcement sub-programs, you realize the budget reduction when factoring inflation for 2 successive financial years, despite the significance of these sub-programs in maintaining the integrity of the environment. Maybe DG, together with your colleagues, you must clarify how will you then ensure effective compliance with law and enforcement thereof in the face of the growing environmental crimes, and then especially rhino and elephant poaching. Then you look at your litigation budget. It has not changed in real terms. It's simply adjusted for inflation. Then the question that comes out of that is whether this means that the department expects the same litigation costs during the 2022-23 financial year. I believe some honorable person indicated some possible litigation depending on how you handle your FRAP issues. Maybe then you need to share with us then, if then there's no increase, how are you going to deal with that? Going to ocean and coasts. Looking on the presentation, maybe you can share with us how would yourselves as a department deal with the research and management of the expanded network of the marine protected areas? And then the ocean economy commitments when considering the downward revision of the budget of these functions. To further go on, it's for one to understand what necessitated the 31.3 million increase in the budget allocated to the specialist monitoring services, noting that in the 2021-22 financial year, the budget was reduced by 26.9 million. And then furthermore, how will this reduction in the ocean economy and project management affect the delivery on the ocean economy deliverables. And then also we want to understand what does the budget reduction on the compensation of employees from 140 million in 2021 to 121.1 million mean for service delivery under Oceans and Coast Program. Then you go back to your 2021 financial year, this Ocean and Coast branch, it had planned to create 1,200 aquaculture jobs, then 1,350 jobs in the 2022-23 financial year. However, the department decided to remove this job creation target in the 2022-2023 APP. And the funds for the ocean economy function were reduced by 68%, meaning 29.2 million. Then the issue here, DG, how important is the development of the ocean economy to the department, particularly when it relates to job? And then a follow-up question to that will be, why were resources withdrawn after years of marketing it as an economic area that has untapped potential? Maybe you need to explain this further to us. And then with regard to the climate change, equality, and sustainable development, here you are on record saying that you will provide 190 million capital injection to the South African Weather Service during the 2022-23 financial year. And then on that, I think we are interested to know what are the capital projects and where are these envisaged capital projects located. And then the other issue on this one, what are the medium-term plan for the international governance and resource mobilization sub-program now that its budget is reduced by 52.8%, that relates to 70.4 million. This one is just a mere emphasis on what Honorable Paulson has raised earlier with regard to functional early warning systems and effective communications that are critical parts for climate change adaptation strategy. And then because, as Honorable Paulson has said, we want to understand whether there was an early detection and communication of the severe weather in KwaZulu-Natal that could result in the floods and landslides. So also moving forward, this is the issue that we would like to get clarity so that we don't get surprised. Then the National Treasury and the department also had held discussions on limiting the carbon sequestration deduction for the forestry management and harvested wood products. Does the department have a mechanism for certifying, including verifying sequestrated emissions in the forestry sector? And then for one to understand as to what are the possible areas of abuse of the carbon sequestration deductions, as this was raised as an issue to be addressed as at 1 January 2022. Then the other issue on this one is with regard to the reductions in the allocation towards the climate change mitigation and the climate change adaptation sub-programs that appear to indicate these sub-programs are on the verge of being closed. What is the explanation for not funding these sub-programs when the expectation is that work related to the climate change mitigation and adaptation will receive significant funding? Maybe if we were to get clarity on that one, that's going to assist us a great deal. And with regard to program biodiversity and conservation, you will all recall, colleagues, that during the 2020 SONA, The President announced that biodiversity economy was a priority. Furthermore, that biodiversity is central to South Africa's tourism industry and building the resilience of community to climate change. Then you look on the budget. On the contrary to that, the budget allocation towards biodiversity economy and sustainable use sub-program was reduced by 14.1% in the 2021-22 financial year, and again for the 2022-23 financial year by 58.4%. DG, maybe you need to explain whether the biodiversity economy is still a priority, and if so, how is it expected to operate with such a drastic cut in funding? Then, DG, there's been a commitment to working with entities to be financially sustainable on their own. Then, when you read the National Treasury's medium-term expenditure estimate, you go to Isimangaliso and SANPAX, they will receive a relatively unchanged allocation, while SANBI will get an inflation-adjusted increase. Can we then be made to understand these anomalies or contradiction against the undertaking by the Minister of gradual reduction of relying on the fiscus by the entities? And then to furthermore, I think we need to be taken on board to understand how will this budget address the challenges that confront the significant parts of our ecosystem, such as our rivers, wetlands, estuaries, and the coastal ecosystems, which are either critically endangered or vulnerable. Then these are the issues that one feel needs to raise with yourself so that you can get clarity on. During that thinking, maybe my other colleagues might want to raise other issues, but for now, I think that's where one should end. Over to you, DG and team. I think the minister will definitely come last.
I think I'll come first, and then with your permission, Chair, and then I will leave other matters to the team. Chair, let me start off by thanking all the honourable members for the questions. Let me start with the important issue that Honourable Paulson has raised about the role of the weather services and weather prediction in relation to extreme weather events. And I think that what is really important to say to Honourable Paulson is that there is an integrated disaster management system that already exists within government. And whenever extreme weather events are predicted, as was the case in this particular instance, the Weather Service, first of all, issues these warnings on as many media channels and in as many languages as possible. And in addition, there is engagement and activation of the National Disaster Management Centre as soon as severe weather is predicted. And obviously, the National Disaster Management Centre rests on an extensive provincial disaster management centre. So I think that the alert system is there and the disaster management system is there. I think that obviously what we have got to start to move towards is what is known as impact-based forecasting. And this is a situation where we don't just say there's going to be severe storms, there's an orange level alert warning for severe storms, But we also start to say, this is what the consequence of those storms will be, and this is what citizens will do, so that citizens can take evasive action. And I think that that is an international trend which is now coming about. One of the interesting statistics, Honorable Paulson, is the relationship internationally and in our own country between severe weather events and loss of life and loss of property. And over a 30 to 40 year period, one can see the impact of the early warning systems and the disaster management system on mitigation to prevent loss of life and also loss of property. And what one can see is that as these disaster management systems have been built, there have been relatively better outcomes in very dire situations. And I think that this is a very difficult matter to talk about, because we are in a situation currently where there has been severe loss of life, and one doesn't want in any way to diminish these losses by saying that if there wasn't this disaster management system, the situation could have been worse. But there is statistical evidence to that effect. But I think at the same time, we all agree that this has been a very severe event, and it does force all of us to go back to the drawing board and to say, what are we going to do to prevent this kind of thing in future? And I think that this takes me to the point that Honorable Bryant is raising about the climate resilience strategies. eThekwini, the city of eThekwini, as a result of the C40 intervention, has one of the best climate resilience or climate response strategies that exists in the country. And I have actually read it, Honorable Bryant. And as you correctly say, that issues of flooding, infrastructure vulnerability, and ultimately, of course, further down the line, there would be the question of sea level rise, are within that strategy. I think the key issue that we are looking at, and you would know because we have presented it to you on a regular basis when we've been dealing with the APPs and so on, and the quarterly reports, is that we have been working particularly with the district municipalities, because the metros have actually, most of the metros were part of the C40 Cities Initiative, and they have benefited from that in terms of developing their climate resilience strategies. What we have been working with the districts on is the process of mainstreaming those strategies. And one assumes that from the side of the metro, that would have been a process they would also have been engaged with. Now, I think that clearly these strategies require a revisiting of urban planning. So there would be people who are currently settled in low-lying areas and in 100-year floodplains and so on, that would need to be resettled on safer ground. There would also be a lot of infrastructure reconstruction that would have needed to be done prior to the flooding, so that you make the infrastructure in the city of eThekwini more climate resilient. And I think that what we've got to recognize is that up until now, there has been a recognition that extreme weather events will occur more frequently. But I think that perhaps we have not understood the extent to which these extreme weather events are going to be immediate phenomena. I think that since the 6th IPCC report has come out, there's now a recognition that these are not events that are going to be happening in 10 or 15 years' time. They are events that are going to be taking place currently, and that we can be facing extreme events with more frequency in our current day-to-day existence. And what that means is that there's got to be a reconsideration around our infrastructure budgeting and our infrastructure planning. Clearly, this is very difficult in a context where we have existing infrastructure backlogs, we have existing housing backlogs, and we have, as a result of the current fiscal situation, shortages in the infrastructure budgets. But I think that you would have heard when His Excellency President Ramaphosa spoke last night. He talked about this three-phase approach to recovery from this disaster. And the third aspect really pertains to this question of looking at human settlement and urban planning. And obviously that has got to be part of our longer term strategy of making all of our cities more climate resilient. Of course, it's also important to look at ecosystem, how we can benefit from ecosystem services, and look at the question of open space and water absorption capacity of existing ecosystems. And this would also, I think, be a matter which is going to be more and more on the forefront as we confront the complexities of these extreme weather events. I think that what one would want to just say with regard to the fishing rights allocation is that this is something that is in process. And from my perspective, I don't want to defend the existing rights allocation. I also don't want to criticize it. I'm waiting for all the appeals. Once the appeals come, we will then, with the appeals team, open up all the decision-making processes that were entered into, and we will be reviewing those decisions. And I think that there were very clear criteria in the policy documents that were adopted prior to the start of this process. And what one will be having to look at is, did the practice of the rights allocation implement the policy documents? And that will be the one process that we will be involved in. And the other process that we will obviously be involved in is the nitty-gritties of whether particular individuals were treated appropriately and fairness in terms of the rules of the process. So I don't really want to comment on it, and I think that it wouldn't be appropriate for the branch to be commenting on it either, because there's going to be a formal process where all interested parties will be saying, we have this problem and that problem and the next problem with the process, and the branch will have to formally respond to those criticisms and allegations. And I think that we should allow that process to take place. Then at the end, we will then have to answer the big questions about fairness. What we have at the moment, the only thing we have at the moment is the report of the process observer, who declared the process to be substantially fair. We have that at the moment. But what we don't have is the specific complaints and the specific answers to those specific complaints. And that is what the appeals process is all about. And I think that we must allow that process to proceed and to be fair. And at the end of it all, those who are still aggrieved do have, as Honourable Paulson says, the right to appeal to the courts. I would just want to say that on the issues that Honourable Phillips raised, the penguin management plan has not been released yet, Honourable Phillips. You haven't missed it. It will be published for public comment, but it has not been released yet. And the shark management plan is still in the process of being developed. It also has not been released for public comment. You haven't missed either of those two important events. I would want to suggest, DG, that we allow SANParks to speak a little bit about our approach to land claims and to community beneficiation in terms of their new commercialization strategy. I think that the points that Honourable Paulson makes about the history of conservation in this country are true. And I think that since the formation of the People and Parks movement in the early 2000s, there has been a deliberate attempt by government to try and rectify these processes. In my view, there is still room to do more, and still room to ensure that there is greater beneficiation that flows to communities living on the outskirts of protected areas. And my view is that until we get that mix right, we are not going to have a viable conservation process in this country. And I think that SANParks is working on a new model for resolving some of the land claims issues. And I think that this new model is very much tied up with improving the beneficiation offerings to those communities. So I think that, Honourable Paulson, these are important points, and I think that it will be important that SANParks inputs on them. And I would also think it would be important that SANParks talks to the baboon management issue in the Western Cape. There is a multi-government structure that exists, Honourable Phillips, and the SANParks can explain to you exactly what exists there and who is responsible in terms of the law for what, including your government in the city of Cape Town and your government in the Western Cape. Honourable Chairperson, I think that when we look at the biodiversity economy, it's very important that we don't just look at the branch, but we look at the role that SANParks plays and the role that Isimangaliso and SANBI play in relation to the biodiversity economy. Because essentially, the major part of the biodiversity economy, a lot of it would fall within our protected areas, although some of it is also obviously in private hands. There's a significant aspect, particularly in the consumptive use of wildlife, a significant aspect that is in private hands and is not necessarily budgeted for by the state, but we obviously would have a role to play in terms of regulation and so on. So, colleagues, I would want to suggest that we now hand over to DG, but perhaps if Mr. Dlamini is online, he might want to just, I don't see him, but maybe I don't have the full list. He might just want to input before DG starts with the departmental issues. He might just want to input on the issues that were raised by Honourable Paulson in regard to beneficiation of communities. Otherwise, if it's not possible now, I suggest that question must be included in the work, in the questions that are put to SANParks later. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Can I hand over to DG?
Thank you very much, Minister. Honourable Chair, we have taken note of all the questions, and I will respond to some of the questions, but I will also request managers to assist in responding to other questions that were raised. I would like to highlight that there were certain questions, I think from Honourable Phillips and yourself, Chair, that I possibly would have missed. I wasn't writing as fast as the questions were coming through, and apologies for that. If we have missed any of those questions, we are definitely willing to respond to them if we do not cover them adequately in our responses. I think on my side, just starting on the issue around the funding of entities and the commitment made by their department working together with entities and also with National Treasury around the sustainability and also ensuring that they are self-sustainable, moving into the long term. Yes, our entities in a form of SANPark have that potential. However, there are current challenges that they are facing, which would have been as a result of the impact of COVID, which has had a negative effect on their revenues. But the entity will talk to the details. They are working on a turnaround strategy and looking into how then they become financial sustainable moving forward. Obviously, we also recognize as a department that entities continuously also provide a public good, which to a greater extent as a department, we will have to then assist them in terms of then funding some of their operations. So what you would note, Chair, is that we have increased allocation to the entities. Let me firstly highlight on biodiversity infrastructure. Isimangaliso have had an additional allocation in respect to that. I think there is an about 8.3 million that we have added to Isimangaliso. But we've also recognized the need around maintenance of infrastructure as a result of a study that was done by SANParks on their various infrastructure. And as a department, we have given allocated an amount of 80 million to assist them. Obviously, this is not coming anywhere close to what is required, but given the current fiscal envelope that we have started to assist them. For source, in as far as infrastructure, and I think they will talk to the detail in terms of the projects, where the projects are and what are these projects. And the main thing is around the air quality stations, where over a period of 3 years, we are also assisting them with some infrastructure injection capital to deal with those matters. So Chair, what I want to highlight is that yes, as a department, we are pursuing looking into the sustainability of the various entities that we have as a department, however, also recognizing that they are responsible of providing a public good and a service in as far as their mandate is concerned. We have also taken a look at some of the programs that they have successfully implemented, and we have assisted through reprioritization, giving them more resources. As you would have noted, Chair, in your question, where SANBI has received an additional allocation, which is increasing the transfers to SANBI, and that's mainly around your EPWP project, your Groen Sebenza NRM project. But there's various other aspects of EPWP projects, both from EPIP, which is your Environmental Program, Infrastructure Program, and also in terms of your Natural Resource Management Program, EPWP programs that the entities are assisting us on. The second part that I also want to highlight, Chair, taking also from some of the questions that you would have raised, is around the issue of irregular expenditure and a roadmap. This is a matter that we're taking very serious, Chair. And an irregular expenditure is mainly as a result of non-compliance to SEM laws. As a department, we have put together very clear policies and also structures that assist in ensuring that we improve on our internal controls. What we've also done so that we share our best practices across the department and entities, we have reconstituted a forum of CFOs, so the departmental CFO with the CFOs in the other and in the entities, so that we begin to have a standard approach to dealing with these matters of compliance, especially around the procurement space. And on an ongoing basis, we are obviously going to be getting a clear sense of the implementation of those best practices, but also action plans that we have put in place to improve not only on compliance with SCM, but also on issues of ensuring that the controls are in place. We do take the issue of consequence management as a serious matter, and I think Member Bryant has been very, very clear on that point, where non-performance and issues of actually not spending should culminate to consequence management. And as a department, we have actually inculcations into individual performance agreements, and also on a regular basis, on a continuous basis, we do monitor that. At my level, I have monthly sessions with Deputy Director Generals, where then we look into their performance. And I agree that as a department, we need to improve in as far as performance is concerned. What we've also realized, or what we're recognizing also, Chairperson and honorable members, is that beyond consequence management, there also has to be, because it's not just consequence management, there's also corrective measures. Putting in place corrective measures and ensuring people are trained for them to be able then to at least some refresher courses, given that there is an update around some of the acts and prescripts that are there. We need then to have the continuous corrective measures in as far as training is concerned. Chair, yes, we are working tirelessly on the current opinion of the department. And as you have posed a question here around, are we going to achieve a clean audit? We are looking at turning around the situation. A clean audit is actually, we currently have issues. Management report is as long as close to about over 200 pages. So in 22-23, we are aiming for an unqualified. It will have matters which we are consistently working on. At this point in time, we are going to move towards at least working towards a clean, but we do not believe in the current administration, because a clean audit basically means you have no matters. And there's a lot of issues which also I've highlighted to the committee that they do require a culture change and the way of doing business to be different from the past, in order for us then to ensure we put in place processes and principles of good governance. The other part, Chair, which you have raised is around the BBBE. Yes, our target has been 90%, and you are quite correct. We have had to review the target. It is now sitting at 65%, and I think your question was around what are the reasons for the reduction. I think the first thing that we have reviewed, this is mainly around the actual baseline. I think coming up with a target of 90%, there was no clear indication of what the baseline is. And as a department, we have been performing around close to slightly above 60%. As at the third quarter, the BBBE stood at about 55%. So that's one of the key factors that we felt we are not necessarily looking at what is the baseline and how then do we improve gradually in terms of then ensuring that we empower more broad-based Black companies as we move along. But the second part is also the constitutional court judgment, where we still not necessarily having a very clear direction on how the issues of Black empowerment, designated groups is going to be dealt with, given the challenge that has been there and a decision around that matter. So we are treading cautiously on this, Chair, but also we are working on a realistic baseline in as far as the current level is concerned. Chairperson, I think there are questions that you raised around reduction in certain sub-programs. I'm going to allow the DDGs to respond, but I think that's where I did not necessarily get the actual details. And we can be in a position to respond to yourselves in writing, where you go further into a particular branch, into a sub-program, a reduction, and what contributes to the reduction. What I can say overall is that as part of fiscal consolidation, our budget has been being reduced. So a reduced baseline by National Treasury. They haven't given us any additional allocation. So whatever we are putting forward as plans, they have to be funded within the resources that we have. But I think the DDGs will then highlight and also respond to these matters. Just one matter, I think, which also has been raised by Honorable Bryant. Apologies, I think, on the acronyms. We've always been including them in our slides. I think it's something that we potentially omitted. We will make sure that we correct it for the future until, I mean, on an ongoing basis, because we shouldn't really assume that everyone knows these and always have the explanatory at the back of their mind. So we will ratify and correct that moving forward. There is an issue also of us not mentioning anything on offshore wind and gas projects. What I want to highlight and flag there, I think it's a matter that has been raised by Honorable Bryant, is that as a department, we have recognized the importance and the criticalness of these key projects in as far as environment is concerned. However, we felt that we need to do further research in the coming years around these matters, so that we can then respond appropriately in terms of the mandate that we have as a department. With your permission, Chair, I'm going to request that I request the first, manager on administration. There was a lot of questions around our personal levels, at what level are we, and also clarification in as far as administration is concerned. We will take program by program, Chair. Thank you very much. Let me, through you, Chair, hand over to DDG Mashala. Thank you.
Thanks, HOD, Minister and DM and honorable members. I think the question that which was raised by Honorable Brandt, the DG has responded to that. I'm not going to go back there. Let me go to the issues that which were raised by Honorable Chair Mutambi. In terms of the first question, in terms of the officials, whether they are expected to be all in the office and what the department is doing in this particular regard. Chair, we are implementing a phased approach in terms of officials coming back to the office. Just after the pronouncement, the OHS committee set and looking at the specific environment, we recommended an 80% occupation with a view that we will then make assessment so that we have an incremental occupancy up until we reach 100% in that regard. The other question that which was asked, it was in terms of the occupation, in terms of the officials, whether all the posts that which we're having, we have verification that they are indeed occupied and we don't have ghost workers. Chair, we implement a head count on an annual basis to reconfirm the number of officials in the department, but over and above that, we have appointed payroll managers in the different sites, and their responsibility on a monthly basis when we pay out salaries is to do verifications in terms of the salaries that which have been paid out vis-a-vis the number of officials that which have received, as well as the actual officials. And we also then do payroll reconciliations in that regard to just reconfirm that indeed we are paying people who are appointed. The chair also asked about the post establishment in terms of the numbers that which we have from the previous financial year to the current financial year. I think just firstly at a generic level to just indicate, Chair, that the post-establishment that which we're having is basically influenced by the movement in terms of staff appointments as well as retirement and resignations. And at any point of reporting, our numbers would then vary, taking into account the turnover rate within the department in that regard. But as well, over and above the permanent appointments, We also have appointments above the post establishment or above the structure in the form of interns as well as contract appointments. In the previous financial year, Chair, you would have realized that whilst we have had a number of posts that which were filled from both contract as well as permanent appointment, at the end of the financial year, we actually set at 60%, which basically would have then spoken to the turnover rate that which I was talking to. However, in the current financial year, which would have then influenced the numbers, is that we are currently sitting at 8%, which is just a bit higher than the previous financial year, and hence the differences in terms of the post establishment for the different years. But to also just inform the members that we are at a point of finalizing the structure for the department, and this has already been submitted for concurrence with the Minister of the DPSA, which would also inform the new post establishment in the current financial year. I think I have answered most of the questions. If there are any other, I would confirm. Thank you, Chair and members.
Thank you, Chair. Can I, with your permission, allow DDG Benderman to respond? There were issues around compliance and also the investigations that we are reflecting on, and a number of other issues. Thank you. In terms of litigation, budget, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. DG, I will start off with apologizing as well regarding the acronyms. EGI means Electricity Grid Infrastructure. We will ensure that in future we do indicate in full before we abbreviate. With regard to the question from Honorable Phillips regarding illegal mining, it is not a target for our department. There is case law regarding the various mandates of the environmental management inspectors, specifically for mining enforcement and compliance. You have the environmental mineral resource inspectors that would check compliance and enforcement specifically for illegal mining. From our department side, we do render assistance when requested to. However, from a legal point of view, we need to act within our respective mandates. With regard to cases finalized and handed over for prosecution, we report on what is within our control. Once the case is handed over to the NPA then runs with the matter, and the matter may not be finalized within the same financial year. So in terms of reporting on successful prosecution, it may reflect on matters that come from a previous financial year. And as we well know, in terms of the court processes, this takes some time to conclude. I just wanted to explain briefly on the verification of elephant tusks and rhino horns. This is part of your norms and standards. It is also to ensure compliance in terms thereof. What we do is we check for DNA and microchipping of these horns. We look at our provinces, our provincial parks, sand parks, Ezemvelo Wildlife. Also, we are requested from time to time from private rhino horn holders. If they require permitting, then we go and verify the horn to ensure that it is legally obtained. So that is the verification process, just to get some clarity on that. There was a question from Honorable Chairperson regarding the reduction of the budget. What we're looking at in terms of compliance and enforcement, we do have other donor-funded projects wherein compliance and enforcement, specifically for illegal poaching is provided, we utilize these resources to assist us in ensuring that we have the capacity amongst our investigators, as well as strengthening the capacity for the NPA and SAPS in terms of ensuring that these matters are properly prosecuted and investigated. So in terms of that, we also utilize, there are court orders where there's monies in terms of the court order for rehabilitation of activities that have commenced illegally. We are working closely with Treasury to ensure that we are able to access those funds so that they are utilized for the purposes for which they are earmarked. And in terms of the comment on the reduction of or the whether the litigation budget is adequate to cover all litigation costs. We actually manage the litigation costs by the respective branches. So depending on where the litigation is, the money for that litigation cost is, it is taken from the relevant branch. Due to the fact the nature of litigation, we're unable to predict the exact amount of your litigation, so we would pay for that from the respective branches. I think, DG, those are the matters that for regulatory compliance. If I have missed anything, I will respond to them in writing. Thank you, DG.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Can I request the program 4 issues around climate change? I think the issues of early detection SOARs will deal with those matters. And there was an issue around the instruments that we're using to measure emissions. Mr. Jongi Witi.
Thank you, DG. Thanks, Honorable Chair and members. Yes, in terms of monitoring in Rustenburg, the question raised by Honorable Phillips, yes, we do have air quality monitoring stations in Rustenburg, and some of them are undergoing refurbishment, and that process is underway. That's the station that is owned by the province, and then the local municipality, they also have stations that are reporting to the National Air Quality Monitoring and Reporting System called the South African Air Quality Information System. So yes, there are air quality monitoring stations there. And then in terms of the questions that was raised by Honorable Chair around carbon sequestration, there were two questions. One was, what is our role in terms of verification? So what we have done as the department is to provide methodological guidance on how carbon sequestration can be measured and monitored and verified. That process, however, is being administered by the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, because they administer the carbon offset scheme, where project owners for these kind of projects or related to carbon sequestration can report their credits generated through those projects. So that's the one thing that we have done. We are not necessarily involved in the verification. And then the second part, the Honorable Chair raised the issue of possible abuse of carbon sequestration. So what has happened is that this is actually the responsibility of National Treasury. And National Treasury, to deal with these possible abuses, they are working on rules to deal with, for example, things like carbon leakage. And there are two areas where there are problems. One is in relation to harvested wood products, treatment of harvested wood products. What happens to carbon that is in the product once it leaves the mill? So this is where Treasury will provide rules in terms of how that should be dealt with. The second part, which might be subject to abuse, is consideration of carbon from plantations that are not necessarily owned by mill owners. So Treasury is also developing rules to this extent, such that only carbon from plantations that are owned by the mills are going to be considered. And we are providing the technical support to Treasury. Thank you very much, Chair. And, yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Witty. Chairperson, through you, can I request the DDG Biodiversity to respond? There were questions in relation to the branch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DG. The first question was around whether in expanding the conservation estate, we will adopt a human-centric resource management approach. Just to confirm that when we do identify land for expansion of the conservation estate, it is a requirement that we consult with stakeholders. We do an ecological assessment in terms of suitability of that particular land for conservation purposes. And where such land falls within communities or even traditional authorities' land, we then, and where infrastructure does not exist, we then have to make provision for such infrastructure to then exist. And once the community and or traditional authority has agreed, we then enter into a management agreement with such communities. There are no areas, I can confirm, where communities have been moved off land to make way for conservation purposes. We do have a People and Parks program where we are working with DALRAD regarding matters of land restitution. And there are agreements that we then enter into with these communities in respect of post-settlement agreement where such land for restitution is then set aside for conservation estates. The model that we have is that it allows for participation of the restituted communities in the management of such land. And also they do get some proceeds from the conservation value of those areas. And then to Honorable Brian regarding the white paper, it's currently going through the cabinet process. We're hoping that it should be published in this in the second quarter of this financial year for public consultation. We have requested public consultation to be extended to 60 days. And that will also include provincial roadshows on the white paper. And I'm sure at an opportune time that the committee will be informed accordingly. Then regarding the issues around the biodiversity economy and whether it is a priority, Chairperson, I can confirm that Biodiversity Economy and Sustainable Use Chief Directorate takes the bulk of the budget within the branch. It is definitely a priority as indicated in our APP. We will be reviewing the biodiversity economy strategy where we'll be adding elements around ecotourism. We will obviously work with the Department of Tourism in this regard. And also we will also add the elements around transformation of the sector because that is quite key. We're hoping that the revised strategy will be, we're targeting that the revised strategy will be approved and adopted by end of this financial year. And then Chairperson, we then ask a question around how we are working with entities to be financially sustainable, and I'm sure that they will be able to answer some of the questions when it comes to their part. Suffice to say that the committee may be aware that both SANParks and Ismangaliso have in the last quarter undertaken investor summit wherein they provided a package of projects that are suitable and are bankable for investment purposes. And through this process, obviously, and they will provide an update on that particular aspect, they will be able to attract the necessary investment in the areas that have been identified. This will lead to increases in revenue once these areas have been developed, and putting these entities on a path for sustainable revenue generation, and possibly reduce reliance on the fiscus. Chair, then there was a question around how we are protecting vulnerable ecosystems. The committee will be aware that on a 5-year basis, we undertake what is called a national biodiversity assessment, which provides us with an indication of biodiversity, on the state of biodiversity across the country. We have just through the cabinet process submitted the National Biodiversity Framework for adoption, which essentially guides us in a number of interventions around how to manage and prevent biodiversity loss in areas as identified in the National Biodiversity Ecosystem. And therefore, this then is a mechanism that we are using in protecting the vulnerable ecosystem, as the chairperson was alluding to. Thank you very much, DG.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I request the DDG EP to respond? I think there was a question also around how we exercise oversight on some of the programs that we have in as far as public employment, but also dealing with NRM and EPIP projects. DDG Mkize?
Thank you, DG. In response to the question raised by Honorable Phillips, I would like to confirm that yes, we do project oversight in that we monitor, regularly monitor the progress of implementation of the projects, and that monitoring also includes the quality of work and also compliance to norms and standards. For example, it would be norms and standards for clearing. I would like to also highlight that how we treat the biomass is and generally an arrangement that we enter into between the land users or the land owners. For example, in certain instances, landowners do request that we leave it neatly packed for further uses, and in some instances with communities, they also request that it's left planked in a certain way so that they can use it further, either for their own needs or for economic reasons, where there are possibilities that it can be further sold. I would, however, like to request that on this particular matter, if it's possible, that we have further details on where in the Northwest the example that was made, so that we can follow up on the incidents, DG. But just to emphasize, there is oversight that we do. Part of that oversight, us as a department, that when we pay for work done, we are actually paying for work done in compliance with standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DDG. Can I request briefly? I think there was
something, DG.
Yes, Minister.
I think that obviously if honourable members in their constituencies feel that any of the public works programs are not working appropriately, they are free to contact me at any stage, and we will then investigate the particular situation. And I want to invite Honourable Phillips, if it is still appropriate and relevant, that if she wishes to write to me about the particular experience she has mentioned, we can investigate that situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to request the acting DDG from Waste Management to deal with the issue of unlicensed landfill sites. I think there was a question around unlicensed landfill site. Mr. Mokoena, over to you.
Site in a municipality will be that it is covered by the intervention by minister to say where there might be details to be provided. It can be
Mr. Mokoena, we can't hear you. Your
my apologies,
is not clear,
Minister.
Mr. Mokoena.
Is it better now?
Yes.
Thank you very much, and my apology for that. I was saying on the question from Honorable Phillips around the landfill site, it can be investigated as Minister has indicated. We do have a program on the licensing of unlicensed landfill sites. Currently, there's 4 that we are currently busy with based on the investigation and the assessment that has been conducted by the department. On the question regarding UPL, we have, in partnership with other authorities, been working on the waste and other issues emanating from UPL, but it's safe to indicate that their hazardous waste is being taken to Shongweni landfill site in KwaZulu-Natal, as well as to Hallfontein in Gauteng, whereas the liquid waste is taken to DCL site, which is based in the north coast of KwaZulu-Natal. This is the Dolphin Coast landfill site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's, I think, program 3, Oceans and Coasts. I think there was questions that you need to respond to. Acting DDG, Raza.
Thank you, DG. DG, I'm looking at the questions now. I think you've covered a substantial amount on the issue around offshore wind farms or programs. The next question that I see here was from Honorable Mutambi, looking at how will research be done on the expanded MPAs. So there are surveys that get done, and vessels go out and they do research either on oceanography and on the biodiversity aspects of research, and they look for vulnerable and unique habitats. And there are areas that are looked for that are recognized as ecologically and biologically sensitive areas. And these are all done with the view to looking at possible expansions, either through MPAs or what they called EPSAs, the ecologically and biologically sensitive areas. Then there was a question specifically on the reduction on the budget for ocean economy, an increase in the budget in special monitoring services, and they're actually directly related, because essentially what has happened is the program deliverables that were under the ocean economy have now been devolved to the budget cost center, which means that the ocean economy budget then gets reduced, and the program in which the program lies gets increased, and you will see that for MPAs, water quality monitoring, and even OSIMs, these budgets that were previously under ocean economy are now moved to special monitoring services, which then explains the increase in special monitoring services and the reduction in ocean economy. There was another question around the jobs. Essentially, with the 1,200 jobs no longer being on the DFFE APP. The explanation for this is that these jobs are actually not created by the department. They're created by industry, and apart from the challenges around getting the information and reluctance of industry, these are side issues. It's what has happened was, in order for us to report appropriately, we removed it from the DFFE plan, so as to not to create the perception that the department is creating the jobs directly itself, because these are really what the ocean economy does, is it facilitates and creates an enabling environment for and it plays a coordination and facilitative role in creating an enabling environment for industry to create these jobs. And they are still, because that relates to the other question about how important the development of ocean economy in relation to jobs are, it's still critically important. It's one of the key aspects around the ocean economy, and we're still doing monitoring of this and monitor the job numbers in the paper. We also look at things when it comes to sector jobs. We have devolved it to the branch level simply because it is not a DFFE direct target. I think the other issues have been covered, Chairperson. I think those are the ones that I have listed. If there's anything that we missed out, we will submit those in writing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chairperson, can I request Acting DDG, Phumezano Dada, matters related to forestry?
Thank you, DG. With regards to the question that was raised by Honorable Brandt on the of us not including the issue of illegal land invasion in plantations in our APP, just to inform Honorable Brandt that this is one of the matters that we have identified as a matter that can have a negative impact in terms of the implementation of the master plan. We have therefore included this as part of our performance agreements for the different senior managers in the branch, where we track progress on a monthly basis through with the DG. We already have an action plan that has been developed for the Western Cape in terms of how we deal with the land invasions in that area through using our act in terms of section 29 of the act with regards to the community forestry agreements. So this is one of the matters that we are dealing with, although it is not highlighted in the APP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. With your indulgence, I think there's fisheries, and then we are done with the responses. DDG Middleton.
Thank you very much, Chair and DG. With your permission, I'm not going to switch on my camera because load shedding has started in the Cape Town CBD. There were two questions, one on FRAP and the appeals, which I think the Minister has eloquently addressed, that it would not be appropriate for the branch to comment on the outcome of the FRAP process, and that it is very important that we allow the appeals process to run its course. The only comment I would add there is that the grounds for appeal are wide, and it's not only the applicants that can appeal the outcome, it's any interested and affected party can also submit an appeal. So that's part of the reason why we've also motivated that we extend the time frame for the appeals process. And then Radia has commented adequately on the aquaculture jobs within the Ocean Economy Master Plan. But just to add that in addition, she correctly pointed out those are industry jobs, not our department jobs. But as a result of COVID, the industry were not able to export their product to the Asian markets because of no flights, and also market demand collapsed for fresh product. And they appealed to the plan that the priority for the next while will be to protect the existing jobs, to prevent job losses, and that they would not be able to grow the number of jobs as initially predicted. And that is why the jobs were reduced and subsequently removed from the master plan. Thank you, DG. That's everything on fisheries.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I think that covers what we could capture. However, if there's any other questions that we missed, Chair would request that we be afforded an opportunity to respond in writing once they have been put forward to ourselves. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, members.
Yes, I will allow members to make follow-ups. Then I'll indicate to you which ones have not been responded to as well. The one that I think the reason why you didn't respond to them, you want to respond to them in writing. Can I check, colleagues, if there are follow-up questions? I see the hand of Honorable Phillips is up. Honorable Phillips, over to you.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you very much for the answers. Minister, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity of being able to write to you about the working on water situation in Rustenburg. The issue about the mining and the environment, there is actually a gap, and the people who are processing the minerals illegally, especially in the chrome industry in the Rustenburg area, I have been there with the Department of Mineral and Energy, and they've said that they have no control over the processing because it does not fall under mining. So there's a huge gap there because these people go in, they just set up one of these washing plants, they use groundwater, and then they just abandon it as is. So there's no oversight on a proper rehabilitation plan and funds for the rehabilitation. So that is a huge concern for myself and for the people in the area, and especially for the farmers as well. I'd also like to thank for the opportunity of finding out about the waste landfill, unlicensed landfill sites. So thank you so much for that. And then on the air quality management stations, I've asked the Rustenburg local municipality to let me know where the air station monitoring, where they are, so that I can do oversight, but no information has been forthcoming. So I would like to know how often they actually do report to National on the air quality management in the Rustenburg area. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Honorable Phillips. Honorable Bryant, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be very quick. It's with regards to the white paper, draft white paper on the high-level panel, application of the high-level panel recommendations. There was some feedback, a little bit vague, just in terms of sort of deadlines. I know it's going to go through the cabinet process, and that's happening at present. But is there any sort of clear timeframes or deadlines in place? There was mention of it coming in the next quarter or the quarter after that. I think this is, incredibly important paper, and you know, the high level panel report and the recommendations therein hinge on this. So can I just ask for some more specifics around the actual deadlines and timeframes for that, so that we can keep track of that and make sure that that takes place? Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Bryant. Okay. I'm gonna also raise the issues that just for them to submit in writing as follow-ups. With regard to the issues around regulatory compliance and sector monitoring, I think we raise the issue of the removal of the target on the Rhino on data management. And then we wanted to understand the reasons for removing the target. I think that's the method that you can provide responses in writing. For administration, colleagues will recall that during the quarterly briefings, the department undertook to engage the Disability South Africa and encourage staff within departmental branches to disclose disabilities to hopefully achieve that required 2% target of people with disability. Maybe if we can get an update to that effect as to how far have we gone. And then on the issue of climate change, equality, and sustainable development, we raised the issue around as to what are the medium-term plan for the international governance and resource mobilization. A sub-program now that its budget is reduced. I hope Mr. Jongiwiti will be able to deal with that. At the end, before we close, we'll give Sawis to respond on the functional early warning systems so that we close up that matter. I think that will assist us a great deal to deal with that. Then coming to the issue of the oceans. As I was listening to the responses, then I just had to come with the following follow-up question to say, how is the department going to monitor if jobs that are created under the Ocean Pakisa are going to be, are not going to be monitored? Because this is a very critical indicator. I think it's time then maybe you need to explain to us, DG, why then you set targets of creating thousands of jobs and billions of rands in an economic contribution under the economic, under the ocean economy. Then the other issues that one wanted to raise, given that we still have some few time after +1, on the environmental programs, DDG Mkis. You look at the budget of your branch, it was increased by 107.5 million. And then the question that comes out of that is how much of an impact is this expected to cause on the pro-poor employment and other empowerment initiatives that take place under these environmental programs. And then the other issue that maybe DDG Mkhize you need to explain to us is the zero budget allocation to the Green Fund. And how will this budgetary move affect efforts to transition to a green economy? It is stated that the Green Fund sub-program invests in projects to protect the environment by working with the donor community and the private sector. Then the question that one has now, how will this protection on the environment be achieved in the absence of any public spending in this regard? Maybe you'll explain your reliance on this donor funding that you are referring to. Then the other issue in relation to that, DDG Mkhize, is the department expecting donors and the private sector to put money into the green fund, or the reality is that this green fund is being discontinued. That clarity, one needs to get it. And then when you factoring inflation, the budget of the environmental program branch decreased by 53.9 million. And then the question again, how will the sub-program environmental protection and infrastructure program and natural resource management programs of the expanded public works program be affected the most by this reduction? Because these are the programs that, as the minister said earlier, are meant to create jobs, to contribute towards fighting poverty, inequality, and unemployment. Then on chemical and waste management, on these matters, you all agree with me that the country increased its plastic waste importation because of undeveloped collection systems locally. Then as a department, you undertook to invest in the collection system that will lead to decreased importation. Then the issue that one wants to understand on this matter, what are the associated targets and the budget for this undertaking in the 2022-23 financial year, because I couldn't locate it there. And then the other issue is in relation to yourself and your municipal counterparts. You remember during our waste in Durban, that we colloquium that we had, you informed us that the landfill sites are filling up repeatedly, particularly in Gauteng, and you will be rolling out alternative waste treatment technologies. And then this such critical matter, one will have thought that we'll see it coming clear here. And then that's why I'm asking now, what are the targets and the budget of the alternative sites and the rolling out of alternative waste treatment technologies? Then on forestry management, then did you know that? I think did you know that? How is the department then planning to manage the plantation? Particularly, you know, this has been an ongoing matter to address the repeat audit findings on biological assets as funds for the forestry operations are reduced. Then you look at the plan, it shows that there will be 33 posts removed from the forestry branch, from 1,396 personnel in 2021 to 1,216 personnel in 2022. Then when we look at that with regard to your staffing issues, one wants to understand which operational areas will be affected by this change, and if important, how will the branch cover the work of the new vacancies? Will the implementation of the forestry master plan, as you presented to us some weeks ago, be affected by the budget reduction in the forestry branch? So these are the issues that one wants to raise, because also the issue around transformation of forestry and fishery communities, they need to be linked to the monitoring of socio-economic conditions. And then the issue there want to raise also to 1330 to deal with some of the issues, respond and write. Then SANPACs will deal with the issue of biodiversity later in the evening. We'll ask that question again. Over to you, DG and Tim.
Chairperson, with your permission, because I think there's a lot of detail required here in the questions you've posed. With your permission, can we have an agreement we'll respond to these questions in writing?
Okay.
Thank you,
Okay,
Chair.
Minister. Did you?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think we are going to respond to all the details in writing. But I thought, and I'm not quite sure when SAWS is SAWS going to come in now, or when they present on their infrastructure related matters.
I think SAWS must deal with that issue now because
We're losing you. We're losing you, Chair.
Presentation.
Chair,
Yeah.
unfortunately, we can't hear you.
It's emanating from that. Bright. Is everybody who cannot hear me?
Chair, we can hear you now. We can hear you now.
Yes.
Perfect.
Your hand was up. Yes.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, I was just going to ask, and with utmost respect to yourself and to the Minister and everybody else, your questions were quite detailed. I fully understand that. But if possible, if the DG could just answer the question around the white paper on the HLP, if possible. Otherwise, if not, can we have a deadline as to when those questions are going to be answered and come back to us? Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Minister?
Honourable Brandt, my understanding is that in the first quarter of this year, it is the intention to take the white paper through the cabinet process. Obviously, that we can't predict what will exactly happen in the cabinet process, whether there will be immediate concurrence or not. Once it's been through the cabinet process, before we bring it over to yourselves, we would have to gazette for 30 days, and then we would have to bring it to yourselves. But obviously, once it's gazetted, it would be in the public domain. This is it's a serious priority of mine. So I am as eager as you are that this process needs to be concluded, because until this document reaches yourselves, I am not in and you have adopted it, because a white paper has to follow a similar process as a bill. So I'm as keen as you are that you should receive it, because I can't implement until it's been adopted on your side. DG, I don't know if you have a specific date when it's going to cabinet, but I think that the cabinet system, it's got different technical processes, and it depends at what level it would be held up. But I think that I myself am nagging every week, where is this thing? So DG, I think that we can't wait anymore.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Chair. We do have estimated dates, but as it will depend on the discussion that happened at the different levels and the different stages of cabinet process. It has been approved at MINMAC level, and it's going into the ASET cluster, the DG cluster on the 12th, and hopefully it will then be discussed and recommended at that level. If there are any comments, then we miss that. We then have to bring it to the next cycle. But we are aiming for the cabinet meeting of the 22nd of June. But also, depending on the approval by cabinet after the 22nd of June, we would like then the public comments to at least take the 30 days or even extended, given the importance of input from various stakeholders in as far as this white paper is concerned. So that those are just estimations, Chairperson, honorable members. We will obviously then be trying to push it until for the first quarter for it to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Then on our questions, they need to be in by midday on Monday, the responses to our questions. Fine, DG? By midday on Monday, all these other outstanding questions. We can then adjourn for lunch. We'll reconvene at 2 colleagues. Then, yeah, it's in terms of our program. So we can break for lunch until 2 o'clock. Then we'll meet at 2. Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Recording stopped.